So here you are, you've been found not guilty in this case where you fired a warning shot to stop this attacking dog. I got to ask you, do you feel like a free man today?
I think a lot of people around here feel like free men today because there was an awful lot riding on this. The gun community was watching this very closely.
They really were. And I've got, can you believe this case even went this far considering what you were trying to do?
It's pretty astonishing. The lack of judgment in this still leaves me reeling. I don't know what to say.
It leaves you reeling. Why?
Well, it was the circumstances were so clear, and the thing that was astonishing about this, I mean, here you have a situation where a citizen chooses to use less than lethal force in a confrontation, and the officer says, "I'm arresting you because you did not use lethal force in this situation." And what do you say to something like that?
It really is amazing. And just so people know, you're a former NRA board member.
Mm-hmm.
You also happen to have 22 years in law enforcement.
Yes.
Were you surprised that the police officer on this case didn't even take that into consideration, it sounds like?
I actually believe, based on his demeanor, that it made him more hostile.
Really?
Yes. That was very palpable on his part. He had a very big chip on his shoulder with me over this.
Because you told him at the scene, didn't you?
Oh, I identified myself immediately. I mean, when you are a law officer, this is what you always do. When you meet another officer, especially in an official situation, you tell him exactly who you are and your status. And that made him more hostile.
I mean, it's amazing. He said you didn't use lethal force. You did that on purpose. You didn't really want to kill this dog.
Well, number one, they're my next-door neighbor's dogs, and I had every legal right to do so. But now, some people might criticize me, if you actually have, but the main reason I didn't shoot the dog is because I didn't want to. I'm fond of dogs, and the thought of deliberately killing one is very distasteful to me. But the important reason was that in the direction that I was facing, just a very few yards away, number one, there is a residence that was directly in front of me. And a few degrees to the right, there is some new home construction with some homes that were partially framed in, and there were no less than a dozen carpenters swarming all over those houses. I could not fire in that direction, even though ideally I would have been shooting down towards almost my feet. If either of those dogs had gotten under my feet or disturbed my equilibrium in any way, I could not guarantee my ability to fire those shots safely. And that meant nothing.
I mean, first of all, here you are, you're trying to protect another neighbor who these dogs were going after.
Yes, there was a lady who was attacked by the dogs while I was trying to corral them. And I fortunately intervened in that and decoyed them away before she suffered any injury. So that pretty well is. Oh, the other point that was emphasized by this arresting officer was that he did not believe that I was attacked. After I fired the shot, understandably, these dogs became rather docile. I scrambled their brains by firing a .45 auto rim next to their heads. His assertion was that since the dogs did not attack him, they could not have attacked me, and that I made the whole thing up to cover myself.
Unbelievable. Did you tell him about how the dog had your leg in his mouth?
He says it didn't happen.
Wow. I mean, you went to court.
Yes.
You testified in your own defense. What did you want to make clear to that judge? I mean, do you think he got it after you took the stand?
Quite frankly, I can only speculate on this. I think he got it before I was ever in the courtroom. I think the circumstances were rather clear, and he shot down all the prosecution's assertions in a very succinct way.
I mean, were you surprised to see this police officer acting like this?
Yes, I was. That is my first experience with a brother officer behaving in such a way. Very frankly, My opinion in this situation is that he did not arrest me for misusing a firearm. I think he arrested me because I own one.
Wow. That's interesting.
Carmel is it's a very pleasant place with very pleasant people. It is what I would characterize as kind of a yuppified, wine and cheese, soccer mom type of community, and I don't think gun owners fit in the Carmel Police Department's worldview. I think we are a class of people that they would prefer were not here. And I think this guy saw an opportunity to try to make an example of somebody, and it blew up in his face.
Well, I mean, do you think that's also why the prosecutor pursued it? I mean, why would any prosecutor pursue a case like this one? I'm sure they got a lot more other things to deal with.
Well, you know, when I first contacted my attorney, he was equally flabbergasted by this, and he says, look, he says, I'm going to call the Carmel prosecutor's office and just ask them if they'll just drop this thing. I mean, it is so obviously baseless. The language in Carmel City Ordinance says that reasonable use of a firearm to protect human life or property is not a violation. It could not be clearer.
Mm-hmm.
And he called him up, and this prosecutor dug in his heels. He says, no, I'm going after this guy. He used that gun recklessly, and I'm going to get him.
Wow.
And they would not consider. They very graciously offered to allow me to plead guilty and just pay the court costs. And I said, do this with your court costs.
Yeah, and who wants to have a record? I mean, especially when you don't deserve one. I mean, you saved somebody. This woman, she could have been badly hurt by this dog. But, you know, did the judge say anything ever about why, you know, this
well,
even
not
was
until he rendered his decision. He was very professional, very impartial, but his opinion... this gentleman I had no contact with before and knew nothing about. There is a single Carmel City Court judge, and the gentleman's name is Brian Poindexter. And one thing I learned from listening to him, I've been in front of a lot of judges in my time, the gentleman is a very astute legal analyst. When this thing was over, he had his ducks in a row, and he was ready. And apparently the prosecutor got his butt handed to him.
Wow. And the reason I asked you about the judge saying anything, because I guess you heard from someone else that he really respected you and the way you handled yourself in that courtroom, considering what you were up against.
A gentleman who attended the trial just happened that very evening to have an encounter with the judge in a social situation where he shook the judge's hand and thanked him for his conduct in this trial, because you never know. This was a politically charged case, and sometimes being right isn't enough in a situation like that. His remark to the judge, the remark from the judge to my friend pertaining to me was, it would have been stupid to make a criminal out of that man.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he probably had a pretty fair idea coming in what the real situation was here.
While all this is going on, I mean, you got a trial, you're waiting for it. Did you think something could happen, that you might end up not a free man today?
Well,
were you worried about it?
The only thing I was concerned about, it is a minor misdemeanor situation, which means I only would have been subject to a fine. Mm-hmm. However, I am a concealed carry license holder in this state. And to get a criminal conviction for something which essentially stated that I misused a firearm would be no joke in that situation. My license could have been jeopardized by that.
Wow.
Which I'm certain the officer was hoping for that, because his last remark to me before he left me was that he was going to do everything in his power to confiscate my firearms and revoke my license.
Wow, I mean, all the judge had to do was hear that, I'm sure. But do you think this has set some kind of precedent?
Well, of course, this is merely a city court.
Yeah.
So as far as the legal term precedent, it probably would not rise to that. Certainly as long as this judge is sitting, it will be a precedent here in Carmel. But I think what has been established is that this police department has learned that they cannot just make up legal standards standing out on the street that are in violation of their own city ordinances and make them stick.
Yeah.
So from that viewpoint, all of Carmel's gun owners are far better off now today than they were yesterday.